Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. You are watching the in-depth International Geopolitical Analysis Bulletin, and right now the world is watching a hotspot that could shake the entire global energy system. The confrontation between the United States and Iran, along with the world's extremely sensitive energy valve, the Strait of Hormuz. And ladies and gentlemen, what is happening is not just war. It is more like a gigantic chess game, where every move could cause the oil market, maritime transport, and even the global economy to sway. A shocking statement. On March 4th, international media simultaneously reported a statement by U.S. President Donald Trump claiming that many of Iran's naval and air force capabilities had been severely destroyed. At the same time, the Pentagon also confirmed a noteworthy piece of information. Just 2 days earlier, Iran still had 11 warships operating in the Gulf of Oman. But by the time of the announcement, not a single one remained visible on the battlefield. A disappearance that made military observers exclaim, "What is really happening beneath the waters of the Middle East?" For decades, Iran has been accused of harassing and attacking international shipping in this region, and Washington asserts that era is over. Because according to the US, freedom of navigation is the foundation of global security. But ladies and gentlemen, if we measure war simply by who is stronger, the story might have ended long ago. Because in terms of overall military power, Iran cannot compare with the United States. But modern warfare no longer operates under that logic. The new rules of war. Today, victory is no longer simply about crushing the opponent. Victory is making the opponent unable to win quickly, unable to win cleanly, gray, and most importantly, unable to win at a low cost. That is exactly what Iran is trying to do. Although the US claims it has destroyed many of Iran's conventional military capabilities, Tehran has not collapsed. In fact, they still retain the ability to strike back on multiple fronts. American losses have also begun to appear. Not large-scale infantry battles, but long-range strikes, low-flying UAVs, and surprise attacks on logistics. Exactly the style of warfare of the 21st century. The first losses. According to military sources, 6 US servicemen have been killed in the initial waves of Iranian attacks. Another 18 have been seriously wounded. But the most symbolic losses came from the sky. 3 F-15E Strike Eagle aircraft, one of America's main strike fighters, have been shot down. All crew members fortunately survived. But losing 3 modern combat aircraft is no small shock, because each F-15E costs hundreds of millions of dollars. And more importantly, it shows that the airspace over the battlefield has become extremely dangerous, a chaotic battle space. One of the reasons for this incident is the chaos of the modern battlefield. Iran is creating a multi-layered war environment with many directions, many false signals, and overlapping warnings. Dense radar networks, surface-to-air missiles, low-flying UAVs, constant alerts. In such an environment, integrated defense systems can easily fall into overload. Error margins increase, and it only takes one moment of confusion for disaster to occur. Why hasn't Iran collapsed yet? This is a question many people are asking. If the Navy has been heavily struck and the Air Force damaged, why does the Iranian regime still stand? The answer lies in a very important truth. Military collapse does not necessarily mean regime collapse. A country truly collapses only when the control apparatus shatters, security forces stop obeying orders, the command system becomes completely paralyzed, and society fractures beyond repair. And history shows airstrikes are rarely enough to change a regime. Iran shifts to asymmetric warfare. While the United States fights with the logic of breaking bones, destroying military capabilities, Iran shifts to a different logic, breaking will. That is asymmetric warfare. Not the classic jungle guerrilla warfare, but cheap UAVs, cruise missiles, logistics strikes, psychological operations, and especially maritime warfare. Iran does not need to penetrate the entire defense system. They only need a very small percentage to get through, hit the right targets, and repeat it enough times. That alone is enough to turn every day of war into a massive bill. The nightmare called UAVs. The most frightening part of Iran's tactics lies in this: extremely cheap weapons. An attack UAV may cost only tens of thousands of dollars, but if it hits a fuel depot, radar installation, or command center, the damage could reach hundreds of millions of dollars. Just one successful strike is enough to disrupt the entire rhythm of an operation. The firestorm tactic. Iran also uses a tactic called a firestorm, attacking in multiple waves from multiple directions against multiple targets simultaneously. At that point, the opponent must keep radars active continuously, deploy interceptors, and redistribute defensive forces. And the cost of war skyrockets over time. This is precisely what every superpower fears. Not losing a single battle, but a war that drags on without end. The terrifying card, the Strait of Hormuz. But Iran's most frightening weapon is not in the sky. It is at sea. Iran does not need to win a naval battle. They only need to make the Strait of Hormuz become a high-risk zone, because about 20% of the world's oil passes through this narrow corridor. Just a few attacks are enough for war insurance premiums to surge, oil tankers to reroute, markets to panic, and the world to start trembling. Has Hormuz been choked? According to many international sources, in the first days of the conflict, shipping flows through Hormuz dropped sharply. Some vessels became stuck. Some shipping companies refused to pass through. Insurance firms tightened conditions. Iran even warned that it could attack ships attempting to cross the area. But the interesting thing is, Iran has not officially declared a blockade. They simply create fear, and the market shuts itself down. Exactly the strategy. No need to fight, the opponent stops on its own. China, the one who hurts the most? There is one detail that surprises many observers. If Hormuz is choked, the country suffering the most may not be the United States. It could be China, because nearly 45% of China's imported oil passes through this route. Hormuz is like the artery valve of the Asian economy. If it is tightened, oil prices rise, shipping costs increase, imported inflation grows, and China's enormous industrial economy could struggle to breathe. A strategic trap. This is the great paradox of the war. Iran wants to use Hormuz to pressure the United States. But if it goes too far, it harms China, one of its largest partners, and this is creating an extremely difficult dilemma for Beijing. China is forced to apply diplomatic pressure, urging Iran to keep the sea lanes open and avoid attacking oil tankers. A situation analysts call the Hormuz trap, a war of willpower. All these developments show one thing. The current war is not about who is stronger, but who can endure longer. Iran is fighting a war of psychological and strategic attrition. The United States and its allies must fire expensive interceptor missiles almost every night. Meanwhile, Iran can launch cheap UAVs, low-cost missiles, and decoys. An enormous cost imbalance. Will air defenses run out? Many experts are beginning to ask, could the United States and Israel run short of air defense missiles? Not necessarily run out completely, but a relative shortage, meaning the rate of use becomes faster than the rate of production. And when that happens, they must prioritize targets, accept risks, and adjust strategy. The chessboard remains undecided. For now, the war still resembles a gigantic chess game. The United States is fighting to force Iran to reveal its cards. Iran is fighting to drag the U.S. into a war of attrition. In between lies Hormuz, the energy valve of the world. If it is truly shut, oil prices could explode, financial markets could wobble, and the global economy could shake. Ladies and gentlemen, this is no longer just a regional war. It is a test of endurance for the entire global economic system. And the big question still hangs in the air. How far will Iran go with the Hormuz card? How far will the United States respond? And how long can China remain outside the conflict? The coming days may answer all of these questions. Today's analysis program ends here. If you find this topic noteworthy, please share your opinion below. In your view, who will de-escalate first in this chess game? Goodbye, and see you again in the next bulletin.